Today we're joined by Lee Harris. He's the owner of Battleboard Studios. He goes in detail with me how he creates display boards for Warhammer 40k and how to get started if you're new like me. As a reminder, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. Now let's go on to the interview. Okay. So today I'm joined by Lee Harris, owner of Battleboard Studios. He's currently ranked number 6 out of nearly 500 others in the ITC Hobby Track. He's earned Best Painted in all 4 tournaments he's been to this year. The ITC Hobby Track is ranked on your best 6 tournaments, so it seems like the only reason he isn't number 1 is because some other competitors have attended a few more tournaments than him. If he continues his winning streak for 2 more tournaments, he'll be vastly ahead of the competition. Lee, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So I went through some of your, Facebook photos, and I see that you travel the country in an RV. You own this Battleboard Studios company. You're playing Warhammer 40k to the highest level and constantly winning painting competitions. What got you to where you are today?
So yes, I do live in an RV. It is a different lifestyle. And because I live in an RV, I can drive to a lot of these larger events and bring my display boards, which makes it easier than putting them on a plane. But I got into Warhammer 6th or 7th edition in Atlanta, Georgia, when I used to live there. I don't even think display boards were a thing. I think if anything, people would buy the old Realm of Battle tiles that came 6 to a table on the old big size, and they would just put stuff on it. But they were, you know, plastic boards. You really couldn't do anything with them other than paint them. Um, and I got into display boards because I saw somebody had a display board somewhere, or I came across it online, or I wasn't sure. And I love creating and building things. So I started looking and found out that really, I think I came across one company that made display boards, and it wasn't even like a company that you would see like at a tournament or something selling things. It was just some posts online about, hey, this I've made some display boards kind of deal. So I was like, wow, this could be fun, and I could do it as a little part-time job and enjoy my work, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned kind of this void in Battleboard Studio or display boards because I went back and I looked at some the best painted awards back in like LVO 2017, and some of the best painted awards had just like a slab, basically just dry brush rock, and it was only in like 3 or 4 years the game has totally changed about what it means to really have a display board.
Absolutely. And a lot of places, I should say places, tournaments aren't even aware that there's hobby track going on still. And that's a case with a lot of the tournaments I've been to. Uh, Before I went to them, I reached out and said, "Oh, are you guys going to have hobby track?" And a lot of the responses I got was, "What's that?" And I literally had to explain, go to the ITC website, and check it out. And it goes along with the competitive scene. And then they were all very receptive to it, but it's still a new thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's one question I had too because if I look on, Best Coast Pairings, the app to look up tournaments, I can find any ITC, international tournament circuit competition around me. But like, there's no way for me to know if it has a hobby track and they're looking for best painted. So is that what you do? You just email the TO?
Correct, because once again, my situation is a little different because I travel. If you're going to your same local 1, 2, or 4 different game stores in your area, you've probably had that discussion with them already, or somebody else has, or the first time you have, you won't have to have it the second time. But me, because I travel different areas, I literally just messaged the TO and asked them, "Hey, are you going to have Hobby Track?" And I've kind of kicked it off in the Florida area where I just came from, and now they all seem to be getting into it. And once they get into it, they love it because it's another thing to help draw in people to the tournaments. A lot of people that go to tournaments aren't there to win the tournament. They're there just to push models around and roll dice and have fun, but they're really into the hobby aspect. And I think, Games Workshop and now the ITC is trying to acknowledge that more so than they have in the past. In the past, they just had some best painted awards, but it was really up to the TOs. Are they going to have it? Are they not going to have it? And just like tournaments used to be before ITC came along, you would just show up and you wouldn't know what to expect. So I think the whole hobby track is going to take off just like the competitive side in the ITC did because people love knowing what to expect from event to event.
Yeah, and I totally agree. A couple of the last tournaments I've been to, even though I knew I lost and so I went like 0-5 or maybe 1-4, I stayed till the end because I wanted to see who won, best painted, and I wanted to see what my placing was in the painting competition. So for me, I know, speaking just for myself at least, it's a huge motivating factor for me to paint my armies and make display boards.
It is, and there's three different types of people out there. There's the people that are super competitive that don't care about painting. There's the people that are super painting that don't care about competitive. But there is more and more of a balance that's growing out there of the people that want both out of the scenario. They want to go and they want to win, but they also want to have those nice painted armies. And I think a lot of them were those competitive people, which didn't really care in the past, but they've seen so many nice armies that now they're like, huh, maybe I can do that.
Yeah, I mean, and to top it off, you are the number one Imperial Knights player in the entire ITC right now, and something like number 40 out of nearly 4,000 ITC players. So Lee is also quite the player in addition to a builder.
Thank you. It's hard in Florida. Most of the players in Florida are really, really, really good. So you're basically scrapping with top people almost every weekend if you stay in that area.
Yeah, so I went through your video because you've got a YouTube site where you kind of walk through how you make a battle board, and I'll put that in the description so everyone else can see that video as well. But can you walk me through? You said you start with the design phase. Can you walk me through all the different pieces that go into a display board?
Um, sure. I mean, it's going to start out with a base, and the base is generally a piece of MDF wood, and whatever size is going to be for the project. Um, and then I'll put some small sides on it, just to make it look nice, and have like a little lip so your models won't fall off. And then the rest of the materials are going to be a combination of whatever that particular board calls for. One of the huge bases, I should say, or materials is your installation foam that you get at Home Depot, Lowe's, stuff like that. You can cut and shape that to several different, you know, buildings, mountains, whatever you want it to be. And then 3D printed pieces that you can just get files to make, the 3D printing world is going crazy right now. So you can almost find anything you need out there to accent this or accent that. And then, of course, just Games Workshop kits, third party kits if you want a particular building or something that, a lot of people know what the Games Workshop terrain looks like. So when they picture a display board, they have just a mind in their mind, they have one of these kits on a board. And that's perfectly fine because that's what they've seen. Because, like you said, there's not a lot of stuff out there for people to see to get ideas from. That's, can be a building that you put on there. And then the main things I use for the ground texture is the Vallejo earth texture. Comes in several different colors, smooth, gritty, and then you can paint that, of course. So with those as the standards, you can pretty much build almost anything out of that combination of stuff.
And so Vallejo earth texture? I'm not sure what that is. Is that like an acrylic paste with sand in it?
Um, so it's basically the Games Workshop technical paints, but in a jar 5 times as big
Way
for
cheaper.
2 times the cost.
Yeah.
Way cheaper, way cheaper. Like, well, I mean, I, I would think if I was Games Workshop, I would make a larger container because if you ever go buy a Grelin mud or whatever, it doesn't last you that long unless you're just literally doing the bases on some miniatures.
Yeah, I
But yeah,
have.
Vallejo is basically that, but in a huge jar.
Yeah, I have one of those bottles, and no joke, it probably lasted me like 10, 15 bases. It's way too expensive. If you tried to do the entire display board with that type of stuff, you'd be spending a lot of money. So
Oh yeah, the first couple ones I did, I used that because I had not found the Vallejo stuff yet.
yeah, that's a good a tip for everyone who's thinks this is going to be super expensive. There's a lot of I'm sure shortcuts and cheaper ways in buying GW product. So I noticed also
Absolutely.
you have boards of all different sizes. What is the standard size for a display board?
So technically, there is no standard size. Um, we're still kind of like in the days of the old west in the display boards things here. Um, a lot of people want something that's easy to get around. So I do build a lot of 24 by 18-inch boards. They can be put into a suitcase if they're, pretty thin to get on an airplane, or they just don't take up that much room on a table. Like if you go to a tournament and you don't have one of these carts you see people pushing around, you got to find a place to set down your stuff. So the 24 by 18 generally can fit right there in the corner of the table somewhere, especially if they have extra room. And it will hold most size armies. It's not going to hold an orc horde, but most marine armies, something like that will be great. A 24 by 24 or then a 22 by 30, which is a quarter the size of the new Strike Force tables that people are playing on in match play, are the two board sizes that Games Workshop accepts if you want to submit an entry to Armies on Parade. But if you're not going to submit an entry to Armies on Parade, which they have once a year, there is zero regulations for size on a board. So however big you want to go, you can go.
Okay, okay. And then, so one of the things that we talked about this in just a little bit, but we might as well get into it right now. So, how do you determine how an army fits on this board? Like you said, how do I really know if I need a 24 by 18 or, 22 by 30?
So that is something that we'll get to in a second, I think. But when I'm talking to a customer, I'm going to find out what their idea for the display board is, and then I'm going to ask them how many models they want to put on it, or roughly, because I'm sure their army will change based on what's happening out there in the world of Warhammer. But you can use just empty bases, or sometimes if I don't have an empty base, or if somebody has a rhino, for instance, and I don't have a rhino, I just go online, find out how big it is, or have them send me the measurements and cut out some piece of paper, cardboard paper, or whatever. And I have to actually lay it out because your models or your army might fit on a 24 by 18 because you might have one of these carrying trays that you've been using as a display board when you go to tournaments, and you carry it around from table to table, and you're like, oh well, it'll all fit on there. Well, once you put a couple buildings or whatever the theme is you want, that's going to take up a lot of room. So yeah, I always lay it out ahead of time, because I obviously don't want an unhappy customer where they're just not going to fit. And if somebody out there is building one for themselves, that's going to be like one of the first things they do. They're going to take this idea, put all these empty bases down on it, or cardboard cutouts, whatever they have. I mean, probably their models, since they'll have them, and then design it on what size they're going to need. A lot of times it's much bigger than they thought it was going to be.
Right. Yeah. I can definitely see you want to err on the side of caution, especially if your army's gonna get bigger, or some models like overhang on their bases, so you probably want to overshoot your measurements just a little bit.
And when you're putting this together, the you don't want everything so crowded that you can't see your army or you can't see the display board.
Hmm.
So you want to leave room so that everything is visible.
Yeah, that's a really good point, to let the board still shine through. And so now we're looking at one of the pieces you made. I believe it was called the Rock, and this was the kind of this Dark Angels like hideaway, is what it kind of looked like to me. Um, each of these boards that I saw you made has a story to it. So where does that like inspiration for these stories come from?
So the rock was a board that I personally built for myself, and it's for my custodes army. But the rock, you're right, is a Dark Angels thing. And that was before I actually got into building display boards for other people. So that inspiration was something I just came up with. That was my second ever display board. I built one much smaller one before that, and I went all out on that one. I was like, all right, I'm gonna put lights in it and stuff like that. But my inspiration was I had this Custodes army, and I wanted it to be just in my head. I came up with this, just sitting around one day. I wanted it to be like a rapid deployment force on an asteroid that was, somewhere in the Terra system. That if the orcs invaded, it was the one of their floating stations. Can't remember what they're called now, but it was in the Custodes book. I was just looking through the lore, and they have these. I can't remember what they're called, but they're floating space stations. So I was like, oh, all right, let me build this floating space station and have this rapid reaction force that comes out of it, and it just took shape from there.
Yeah, and then so obviously, if let's say a customer comes to you and they've got a great description of the board, I'm sure that makes it easier. But do you ever have a customer say, "Hey, I've got let's say, Smurf Ultramarines or blue and gold, like, you take some creative leeway. What do you think would look best?"
So I try to get more information out of them
Mhm.
because I don't want to just build something that they have no idea what it's going to be, because they might like it and they might hate it. My mind can only think of so many things, but everybody else out there can think of so much more when you add it together, and people think of all different things. So what I like to do is just ask a couple questions, and then we'll start talking back and forth, and I'll feed off something they say and they'll feed off something I say, and before it or not, that the customer has these cool ideas that they're now excited about, and that's when they're going to end up with something they want, because they have come up with this idea and they're excited about it. They might have taken one thing I said, but it sparked a whole series of things on their side that they then fell in love with, and then I'm going to build what they want instead of me building what I want that I hope they're happy with.
Right. And so how do you come up with these, like a color scheme or, a scheme of the display board to kind of build off of the color scheme that the customer has for their models?
So the biggest thing is I have to find out if the customer's models are already built, and if they are, if they're based,
Mm.
because I have to match the basing. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. Like if they have a mud base that has green flowers, I don't have to have green flowers because they'll probably have enough of those already. But it has to go match in together. And hopefully when the customers painted their model, they have some contrast between the model and the basing, which is, one of the things you do when you're painting your models. As far as if you ask a painter, you want to contrast there so that it stands out. If they have a gray model with a gray base, I might not be able to do too much with it as far as making the models pop. But I have to. Sorry, I'm getting off track here. I have to make the base of the display board match the base of their army, and the whole thing doesn't have to match. If they have, like, once again, that mud on the base, I can have parts of the board that aren't muddy, as far as like a concrete floor or something like that, but then have little spots of mud on it so that their models still flow with it. And then I also want the rest of the board to display their army. So if they told me they had if they were playing Blood Angels and they had red Blood Angels, well, I don't want the backdrop to be red, because then that's going to just hide their models. I want to make then a contrasting color so that their models are going to pop out. So I basically just find out a couple of details on what color the basing is, what color the models are, and then when I put it together, I find colors that show off that army.
Right, and I'm looking at this board you've made. It's got a kind of grayish white, almost like castle in the background. A few, let's see, uh, these like guard barricades in the front with guardsmen behind them, tanks, knights. And one of the things I really like about this color scheme is that, it's got, red and white color scheme for all the vehicles, but then you got this reddish mud, this, whitish castle, and it feels like not only does the base match the bottom of the display board, but also the whole color scheme works together. So I really like this piece that you made.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, you want everything to flow together. That's the goal, so that when the customer puts their models on the board, it looks like they're standing on the board instead of a base.
Yeah, and you already talked about a little bit before too about how you work with a customer. But is there anything else that you do with the customer as you're creating the board and working through this whole process with them?
Um, well, so I guess A to Z with a customer, generally I'll get a Facebook message or an email or something like that, and somebody be like, "Hey, I'm interested in getting a quote on a board," or the first question is generally, "How much are your boards?" Because that's obviously what everybody wants to know. So what I do is I set up, 15 to 30 minutes for a phone call with the individual, and we'll go through what their vision is. Like, what do you want? What's your army, and what do you see happening? And they might say, "Oh, well, I have this guard army, and I want it's a death court of Krieg, and I want some trenches, and I want the to be like a muddy battlefield, like World War One." And they might have this entire thing that they want, which is fantastic for me because they already have the idea. And now I'm just going to figure out more details. Like, okay, well, how many models do you have? And because if they have like 10 tanks, well, I have to make room for 10 tanks,
Right.
But I'll get some basic stuff. We'll go through everything. I'll ask them questions about, oh, do you want, just like, oh, what kind of trenches, bunkers, and I'll just flesh out that idea a little bit more. Flesh out that idea a little bit more and find out what exactly they're looking for. And then I'll, end the phone call there, puts together a quote for them and call them back with a free quote on what they've decided. And then, we can go from there if they want to move forward or if they don't want to move forward. But everybody's going to get a free quote up front on what they want as far as a board.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked about the display boards that you've done is that there's very much different levels. It's not like you know one size fits all. Like some of your display boards are a little more simple and they've got terrain and it kind of is flat and more like practical for carrying things. And some of them are just absolute works of art for like actually displaying and winning best competition. So I like how you have a very wide array of the boards that you can make for people.
Yeah, I mean everybody wants something different. Some people literally want not a movement tray that they assemble. They want something that looks nice for their army, but they want it small. They want it to go on a plane, like I said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then some people have these rolling carts and they're like, no, I want this huge thing that is going to be amazing. And then there's a lot of people in between. I mean, most of my display boards start at $300, which is not a lot for a display board. Um, and most of them are in the 400 to 500 range with a good amount of detail. And then some are, you know, really expensive. Like the night board I built is my showpiece, and I did keep track of how long it took me and everything because I knew the first question everybody was going to ask is, well,
Yeah.
how much is something like that? And something like that is like about $1,700.
Yeah, and one thing that is nice about it too is that this isn't like you just use one board for one army and then you got to have a whole new board like this. You could use this for multiple armies or for years and years and years. Let's say if you played Knights or Blood Angels and you had a board made for them, you could just use that for as long as you use the miniature.
No, yeah, absolutely. I have customers that I'm working on right now, and they're like, all my armies are based exactly the same, and I want you to build me a display board so I can use them for all my armies.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's a complete thing that you can do. So it's not like, oh, well, I have to buy this and I'm not going to use it next year. I mean, you might want a couple of the inexpensive ones because you might have completely different armies and they look different. But I mean, if you invest in a really nice, amazing looking display board, you can put multiple armies on it without a problem.
Yeah, especially with a like a kind of like a neutral color scheme like you have with these the white castle background here. Like I could see any color or any type of army using this and still looking crisp. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about was, you had a picture of this same board where actually you could remove that middle piece and all the side pieces. So it kind of like got smaller. Like you could make it smaller, make it more and more compact, easier to travel. And it even had a little like a place for a dice bag and a chess clock. So now I'm seeing that there's like practical reasons besides just showing off your models. Is there anything else I'm missing for extra benefits of having a display board?
Um, well, benefit. I mean, not really benefits, I guess, but bonuses, I guess you'd say, or maybe a benefit. Um, so if you don't have that rolling cart to put something on, which I didn't in the very beginning when I built the display board, I was like, all right, well, where am I going to put my dice and my chess clock and all that stuff, like you said. So I literally would build a building with a fake roof in the back, or a false wall, or whatever you want to call it, and it would hold the chess clock, the dice bag, the tape measure. So when I got to the table, I had all the tools I needed, which is something that's easily done. And then the board we were just talking about, it had the knights and everything on it. That board, the walls, I guess the defense line, so to say, was completely removable. It was removable for two reasons. One, for transport, but for this, the second was because that was then a piece of terrain that that individual could use on their board at home and play with. So it became not just a display board, but also terrain to use in their games.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I mean, I know I've made the mistake one time of going to a tournament and I had all my models packed in foam. And then, I finished my game one at a table and I had to go to the next table. So I had to put all my models back into my foam, transport them, 50 feet, and then pull them all out of the foam. So, I mean, having a display board to be able to move your models too is, I also see that as a, much smarter way of getting from game to game.
Yeah, it makes it much easier.
And so in some of your art, I saw that you had, and you talk about it in your video as like the wiring phase, because a bunch of your pieces actually have lights. Now, even these photos don't really do them justice because these lights, some of them will blink or change colors. So when I saw that, I thought, oh, like I'm intimidated. This is, more than I can handle. Is that like, how hard is this wiring phase and the lights?
So the wiring itself is not hard, but you have to plan for it in the design phase. Like the rock, for instance, that had the hangar bay with the grav tanks in it. Uh, it would be very easy for me just to cut three walls with a roof and stick those tanks in there without any lights. But if I was going to put lights in there, now I have to figure out, okay, I'm going to need a false ceiling, kind of like if like a drop ceiling, like in an office building or something, and then where are those wires going to run to? Where am I going to put the switch? Where am I going to hide the battery pack? Different things like that. So the wiring itself is not intimidating, but the build is going to be substantially longer and take a lot more in the design phase to accommodate for that. Hard, not once you get used to it, but it's definitely going to be intimidating for somebody who's never done it before.
And so, one thing that I had talked to a competition painter a couple days ago, and he was telling me, you know what? Sometimes, if you're painting an army, the judge is going to look at it from the front, so you can kind of, cut some corners on the backs of these models. Is it the same way for display boards? Could I kind of like take a little bit of shortcut, or maybe leave like that wiring outside in the back, or judge is not gonna, really care about that?
Um, I mean, I can't say if a judge would or would not care about that because that's going to be just up to the judge themselves. But when I build display boards, I can build them in two ways. I can build it as a display board that you're going to sit down and look at from, you know, uh, the front left, the front right, walk in where you can see, and it will have a backdrop. Let's say I build a couple false buildings on the back. in that if you were to walk around, obviously there's not going to be anything there because it's just the front of a building, kind of like at a Hollywood studio set where you see this big building and then you walk around in the back and there's nothing there because you're meant to look at it from the front.
Hmm.
My Knights display board, since I put it on a cart, I knew people were going to walk all the way around it though. So my Knights display board is built as a complete 360-degree model. When you walk around the back, you can see the cracks in the foundation. You can see the rust streaks from the vents that are on the back that you can't see from the front. You can see a uh, sewer grate, different stuff like that. So that's really going to be up to the customer and what they want. And how they're going to display it. They might simply not care if it has anything on the back, and when they keep it at home, it's going to also be a display for their army and their house, and it's going to sit on a shelf, and nobody's ever going to see the back of it. So once again, that's just up to the customer. That either way.
Yeah, but it's definitely obvious all the little details you put into this night piece. Um, one of the things I noticed as I was going through it were, I'll call them like almost Easter eggs, kind of like little details you put in. So we have like a zoomed in picture at one of your, I believe it's called an armiger knight. I'm not super knowledgeable on it, but on the right of here, you see a picture of a Tyranid with like a bullseye, some like maybe warning notices hung up on the walls, chains. Like there's so much detail that I see as I go through here. Can you kind of talk to me about how you think of these ideas and how you're making these little things?
Sure, sure. So, my original idea with my night display board was I was, and it didn't turn out this way, but it kind of did. My original this idea was based on the movie Aliens, and the Space Marines, but instead of Space Marines, they were going to be knights, and how they had the Tyranids or the aliens, all around them, and they were at the factory there. So I obviously decided on Tyranids as the invading force, and I found these little, um, I guess, posters that you can cut out, and some of them have the Tyranid things on them, and then some of them have just like documents on the wall, and then I put in some damaged shoulder blades that had been taken off like previously repaired armature, stuff like that. And I tried to tie it all in with little themes like that so that when you're peeking in this one room, you're like, oh wow, look at that in the back corner there. Oh wow, look at that over there. Just things that you don't see until you actually look into it. If you go around the back side of the display board, underneath the Mechanicus walkways, you'll see a couple Tyranids there that are trying to, sneak in through the back. That you won't see from the front because from the front they're obscured by the walkway and the other Mechanicus stuff there. So yeah, these are things that depending on how much room I have in a board, like I might just have like a couple inch of dead space when I design a board that I can throw something in there that the customer never asked for, and it's just a little surprise, and you won't see it until you walk around the side. So, you know, the sky is the limit with that kind of thing. It really just depends on the customer, what they want, and of course, then the budget and how much they want to put into it.
Yeah, and the other thing I like about those little details, besides the fact that like you're just learning more and more about the story as you go through, but also like you can kind of build on this board as time goes. It's not like you build a board and you don't touch it anymore. Like after you've built the frame and blocked out all the colors, you could then come back to it in a couple months and be like, you know what, I'm gonna get some more detail. I'm gonna put some barrels over here and kind of upgrade it over time.
Oh, sure. Like if somebody's building their own board, they don't have to sit down and build 100% before they take it to an event. I mean, they can start with the base structure that they had to build out of the foam or the model or whatever they're working with, and they don't have to put what I call scatter terrain on there. The ammo crates, the posters, the attacking Tyranids, any of that stuff. They literally can just start with, okay, I got this building done, I got it painted, and my models are on there. It looks pretty good. Then I can come back next month, be like, all right, well, I'm gonna add some scatter terrain out here. Okay, I think it would look really cool if there was some like Chaos Space Marines trying to bust in from the left over here. I got the Marines defending it. Yeah, I mean, this can be just like your army, and you can grow it. as you grow your army, and work on it so that it's not overwhelming, from that standpoint. Like the board I have now for my knights is way more advanced
Mm.
than the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth board I ever built. And it's just like painting an army. You could your the fifth army you paint is going to be way better looking than the first army you paint. And so your ability to do things is going to grow as you do it more often.
Yeah, and I totally agree because initially, I went to that same GT you did in Albany, Georgia, and I got like maybe like ninth place. I didn't even have a display board, and I was talking to the TO, and he was like, "Hey man, if you're serious, you got to get a display board." And then I look over at this night board you have, and I'm thinking to myself like, there's no way I can do that. So I really like the idea that you can build on it. It's going to be iterative. Your first one's not going to be the best one, but that's the whole point. You don't take the first model you ever painted into a painting competition. So we shouldn't hold ourselves to that same standard or to a different standard when it comes to the display boards.
Correct. And it's something that's not as easy to get into, like you said, because there's not a lot of stuff on the internet there, for like you can go on the internet and find 1,000 companies trying to sell you paints or paint brushes or painting tutorials and all that stuff. But with DisplayBoard, there's just not a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, and one of the other things I really like about this night board is kind of the 3D element of it. You've got almost, I'll call it like four different tiers where all the different knights are standing on, and the kind of the tops of the buildings and all the things going on. So I really think this, like the 3D aspect, kind of the backdrop for your army is really important. And when I was going through and looking at other display boards, I was looking at ones from LVO for the past couple of years because that's a lot of talent goes there too. And some of these things were like no joke, several feet high, and it feels like there's like like an arms race of display boards because there is no regulation size. Is can you talk about that? Kind of like the size differences in display boards, maybe.
So it's funny you say that because that actually, now that you're saying that, might be one of the things that prompted me to get into building display boards. Because 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I don't remember at this point. Obviously not last year, but 2 or 3 years ago when I was there, because I've been there the last couple of years, I was putting my army on the table or doing whatever, and I turned around and looked, and I literally saw this 3 foot tall display board against the back wall, and then like a 2.5 foot one next to it, and I was like, "What are those?" So I literally just we were between rounds. I walked over there and looked at them. I was like, "Wow, this is cool." I mean, I personally liked them. I like creating stuff like that, but I was like, "This is amazing." And then I was thinking, how the hell did they get that thing to Las Vegas? It come to find out, one of the guys lives 2 hours north, in Utah, so it wasn't that big of a drive. Hard, but yeah, um, and some of them can be huge, and there is. It's not necessarily bigger is better. I mean, these were obviously really good, and they were really large, but it's just like if you paint an army, if you get an Imperial Knight, some people are really good at painting them, some people aren't. And you have like a Space Marine, you might have a much better painted Space Marine than you do an Imperial Knight. So, it just comes into what you comes down to what you put into the board, just like you would a model. And I would just go with whatever size is going to work for your army.
Hmm.
Um, if you want something larger because you have a vision, then that's great. I definitely would not try to start out with a board anywhere close to that size, because I think it would probably be like these people that buy a house that want to remodel the entire thing, and 10 years later they're still remodeling it
Right.
because they just did not know how much work it was going to be. So
Yeah.
start out with something small, but there, like you said, there's no there's no size regulations. And it's the only size regulations, like I said, if you want to enter into armies on parade, and then it's just a 2x2 board. You literally could build 3 feet tall. So, and kind of like the comp side written RAWRAI, written as
Right.
worded, written as intended. No, you're taking and maximizing that space because there's no ceiling on the height. But a lot of those were really cool. They were like literally a castle with a waterfall underneath
Oh
it,
yeah,
and
they're incredible.
stuff like that. So they were incredible. Yeah, they were incredible.
And it's just one of those things where it's like you think of that if you're like, wow, I have to build that, then you'll never even start. But it's just like you said, you wouldn't you wouldn't buy 120 guardsmen and then go try to paint them at a character level. You'd never finish it. So I think you have to do the same way with the display board. Like if start with probably the size that you can actually do well and complete.
Yeah, and if you have no hobby skills, like I guess experience, with it, don't even try building the board first. Like if literally you're have an idea of making mountains with the foam,
Hmm.
just go buy a couple pieces of foam and start trying to make the mountains with the foam. Don't buy the board or anything else yet. See if you can even get to where you'd like before you invest all the money in all the other components.
Yeah, I mean that insulation foam. A lot of those basic pieces are so cheap anyway that you spend a few dollars to try it out and test how it looks.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're yeah. You can go buy a 2x2 square for $5 or an entire 4x8 sheet for 20. So yeah, you got plenty of stuff to work with.
Okay, so yeah, I myself have maybe 5 months to create this whole display board for myself for Warzone Atlanta. But let's say you had infinite money, infinite time. You could make any board you want with that. What would be the battle board of your dreams?
So currently it's my current board because that's my latest greatest idea. I also live in an RV, and my wife already complains about how much room Warhammer takes up in the RV. I have two armies and two display boards in an RV, which is pretty hard to fit places. Um, so, I mean, I took a lot of time and thought and effort into building that board, and I mean, I had to go out and find a special food cart just to wheel that thing around on because it is the 22 by 30-inch size.
Hmm.
Um, I don't currently have another latest greatest idea. Um, After building this board, my Custodes display board, which has never even seen a tournament, I look at it and go, that could be better,
Right.
But it's just kind of one of those things, It's like as your skills improve and you learn you can do more things, you're like, all right, well, what else can I do? And that's what I love about building display boards. Love creating and what can I do and how far can I push this? I think I'm probably at my level though with the RV as far as how big I can go and what I can put into it. But like I've seen some huge dioramas from like the Horus Heresy at in these Warhammer Fest pictures and stuff they post. I mean, I would love to build something like that. I would just have no place to put it. So
Right.
right now it's my Knights board, and I'm sure it'll be something else, but I'm 100% happy with what I currently have.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was totally amazing. As soon as I saw it at the GT in Albany, I said, okay, well, I'm certainly I'm certainly not getting first. Not like I really had a good shot anyway. But I mean, yeah, it was clear that you were going to win with that board and that army you had painted.
Thanks. I mean, it's definitely eye catching, and that's what I went for because I'm trying to win best painted, obviously, or hobby track, but it's also my showpiece. I mean, I do build these, so I want people to do a second look, like, oh, what was that, and come over and start asking questions because that's how I'm going to end up, hopefully building display boards for new customers down the road.
Yeah, no, that's totally awesome. And so, there's plenty of listeners here who've never made a display board. I certainly haven't. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting off and is kind of intimidated by all these steps and processes and how great these other display boards look like?
I mean, first of all, I wouldn't worry about just like your reaction at Albany. I wouldn't worry about like trying to build what I have or what some other studio has out there. I
Mhm.
mean, when I go out and buy a GoPro camera, I'm not going to be producing Hollywood level material, So, and we all know that. So, having your own expectations, set forth is to start with. Like, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. What am I going to do? And a lot of people, the only thing that they actually have in their mind as an idea is stuff that they've already seen, like on the Games Workshop site, like Sector Mechanicus Ruins or a Basilinum or however they pronounce that stuff. All those models that they can actually go and buy, and that's a great place to start because somebody's done the work as far as in creating the model. You're just going to put it on some stuff, and you can then start with just some simple foam work. I mean, obviously, I have a lot of tools to work with the foam and a table saw to cut the foam and make square buildings, and that's stuff that people aren't going to go invest in day one. They're going to, you know, invest. That's why people hire somebody to build their fence or their deck for them. They're not going to go out and buy $1,000 in tools. They're going to hire somebody and end up with the product, which is where I can come in. If you want that super level stuff and you don't want to go buy all the tools, then you'd find somebody like myself. But if you want to build it yourself, then you're not gonna you're just gonna have to start with something that your skills can do, and whatever those skills are is going to be based on that individual. Like some people are going to be very handy and some people aren't. So I mean, just start with something that you're comfortable with and then do some research. The internet's got a ton of stuff out there on foam cutting, and you can get like a $20 or $30 foam cutter cutting mountains and stuff with pretty inexpensively. So you can start out with that stuff. And I mean, like I said, the internet's great. You can just Google a couple of things and find plenty of inexpensive tools to work with without having to go in like I have to buy all the stuff needed to do everything out there.
Yeah, so just to kind of summarize a couple of those points, don't compare yourself to some of the best stuff out there if you're starting out. And then go to some other sources, whether it be like maybe Warhammer terrain or things that you like. Use that as inspiration and maybe some basic parts you can kind of buy ready made and start off that process. But if you're looking for, maybe you're not interested in actually building a battle board, but you still want one of these, find a company, like Battleboard Studios and kind of work with them to create one of these awesome pieces.
Yep. You said it much quicker than I did.
No, it's all good. And then, so where can people find you? I've got your Facebook page here, but where can people find you, connect with you, talk to you about battle boards?
So I do have a website. It's pretty easy. It's just battleboardstudios.com. And then same thing on Facebook, Battleboard Studios. And my email is lee@battleboardstudios.com. They're all pretty easy.
Right, and then what I'll do too is I'll put all those in the blank on the name, a little description of the YouTube video. So if anyone wants to check those out, all the links will be down below. So Lee, thank you so
Awesome.
much for coming to this, having this interview with me, and talking about Battleboard Studios. I hope to have you on again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's chat in the future, and maybe we can work up something for Warzone together.